There's a feeling you get when you walk through a city that used to be alive and isn't anymore. The storefronts are dark, the sidewalks are quieter than they should be, and somewhere in the back of your mind you keep thinking, wasn't this place full of people not that long ago? That's exactly what's happening in San Francisco right now, and today we're going to talk about why San Francisco feels empty now. The shocking reality. A city that was once the envy of the world. To understand what San Francisco has become, you first have to remember what it was. For much of the 20th century, San Francisco was considered one of the most remarkable cities in America. It sat at the edge of the continent, perched on its famous hills, surrounded on three sides by water, the Golden Gate Bridge, Fisherman's Wharf, the cable cars rattling up and down the steep streets. There was a romance to the place, a feeling that the rules of the rest of the country didn't quite apply here. In the 1950s, it was the birthplace of the Beat generation. Writers like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg gathered in the coffee houses of North Beach at a little bookshop called City Lights, and they helped shape a new kind of American voice, restless, searching, deeply alive. That spirit filtered through the decade, and by the time the 1960s arrived, San Francisco was ready to become something even larger than itself. In the summer of 1967, roughly 100,000 young people flooded into the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood in what became known as the Summer of Love. They came from all over the country, drawn by the idea that something new was possible, that community and music and peace could fill the streets in place of the old order. Bands like the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane were playing out of the same neighborhood, and the sound they made, loose, improvisational, electric, became known worldwide as the San Francisco Sound. The Fillmore District had its own history and a different kind of music. In the years after World War II, a wave of Black Americans came to San Francisco as part of the Great Migration. The Fillmore became the center of a thriving jazz scene, so vibrant it earned the nickname the Harlem of the West. Clubs stayed open past midnight, and musicians like Billie Holiday, Chet Baker, and Charlie Parker performed there. That community was a city within a city. By the 1970s, San Francisco was home to another defining movement. The Castro District became one of the first openly gay neighborhoods in the United States, a place where people came to live freely and build a life on their own terms. Harvey Milk became the first openly gay person elected to public office in California when he joined the Board of Supervisors in 1977. His story, and his assassination alongside Mayor George Moscone in 1978, became part of the city's permanent fabric. The BART subway system opened in 1972, connecting San Francisco to the broader Bay Area. The Transamerica Pyramid went up the same year. The city was building, expanding, reaching. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, under Mayor Dianne Feinstein, a wave of high-rise construction spread through the financial district. San Francisco was becoming a true metropolitan city. For anyone who was there during those decades, the city had a quality that is hard to put into words. It was alive in the way that only cities with genuine character are alive. Neighborhoods had identities. People knew their neighbors. The streets had noise and color and argument. It was imperfect, complicated, and deeply human. Chinatown, one of the oldest in North America, had its own golden era. Through the 1940s, 1950s, and into the 1960s, the neighborhood was home to the largest concentration of Chinese-owned nightclubs in the country. Places like the Forbidden City and the Chinese Sky Room drew in Hollywood celebrities, alongside everyday San Franciscans. Rita Hayworth visited, Humphrey Bogart. The neighborhood had its own stars, its own music, its own particular version of the city's wider restlessness and energy. North Beach, Chinatown, the Fillmore, the Haight, the Castro, the Mission. Each of these neighborhoods was its own world, with its own history and its own particular population. What they shared was the feeling of belonging to something bigger. They were all part of San Francisco, and San Francisco, in those years, felt like a city that was inventing itself in real time. The first wave, the dot-com boom. The 1990s brought something new to San Francisco's story, and it came fast. By the mid-1990s, the rise of the internet was already reshaping the Bay Area. Silicon Valley, south of the city, had been home to technology companies since the 1970s. But now the tech industry was pushing north. The South of Market neighborhood, SoMa, as locals called it, began filling up with startups. Young programmers and entrepreneurs were arriving in numbers that the city had never seen before. By 1999, employment in San Francisco's emerging tech sector had ballooned to around 40,000 workers in over 1,000 companies. Venture capital was pouring in. Rents were rising sharply. The Mission District, long a working-class Latino neighborhood, saw rents climb steeply as tech workers moved in and pushed up the cost of living. The dot-com boom was San Francisco's first wave of large-scale gentrification. And then, in 2001, it ended. The dot-com bubble burst, and thousands of companies collapsed almost overnight. The tech workers who had arrived so quickly began to leave just as fast. The city went quiet for a while. But the underlying shift had already happened. San Francisco had established itself as the home of the tech industry. And when the recovery came, the second boom was even bigger. Through the 2000s and into the 2010s, companies like Twitter, Uber, Airbnb, and Salesforce made San Francisco their base. The city's relationship with the tech industry deepened enormously. By 2013, technology represented nearly 7.5% of all private sector jobs in San Francisco, up from less than 1% in 1990. Office space throughout the city filled with engineers, product managers, and designers. The salaries being earned in San Francisco were among the highest in the country. The effects on the city were dramatic. Housing prices climbed to extraordinary levels. By the time the second tech boom was in full swing, the median sale price of a home in San Francisco had reached well over $1 million. Longtime residents who had rented for years found themselves priced out of neighborhoods they had lived in for decades. Communities that had existed for generations were disrupted. The character of entire blocks changed as older businesses closed and gave way to the restaurants and coffee shops that catered to a younger, wealthier demographic. There were protests. In 2013 and 2014, demonstrators blocked the private shuttle buses that tech companies like Google were using to transport their employees from San Francisco to campuses in Silicon Valley. The buses had become a symbol of something that many longtime residents felt deeply, that the city was being remade for one group of people at the expense of everyone else. San Francisco had always been a city of change, of boom and bust, of new arrivals reshaping old neighborhoods. But this time, the scale was different, and beneath all of it, problems were building that the boom had done nothing to solve. The problems that were always there. It would be wrong to suggest that San Francisco was without problems before the pandemic. The city had been struggling with homelessness and drug use for decades. The 1980s brought cuts to federal mental health programs, and the effects showed up on San Francisco's streets. The city's homeless population grew throughout that decade and never fully came down. By the time the second tech boom was underway in the 2000s, homelessness in San Francisco was a visible and painful daily reality, even as office towers were filling up and rents were climbing. The Tenderloin neighborhood just west of downtown had long been the part of the city where poverty and addiction were most concentrated. But the crisis was spreading. Open drug use became visible in more parts of the city. The Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels were, according to an 18-month investigation by the San Francisco Chronicle, directly feeding product to dealers operating in the Tenderloin and the South of Market area. By 2023, overdose deaths in San Francisco reached around 800 in a single year, a number that stunned even those who had been watching the crisis for years. The city was spending enormous sums trying to respond. Between 2022 and 2023, the San Francisco Police Department received an additional $115 million in funding, though residents in the neighborhoods most affected said the increase in policing was not being directed where it was most needed. Crime was also becoming a factor in how businesses thought about staying in San Francisco. Retail theft, in particular, became a serious issue for stores in the downtown area. Major national chains began citing safety concerns as a reason for closing locations. The combination of high rents, declining foot traffic, and the challenges of operating in a difficult environment made the downtown increasingly unattractive to retailers. And then, March 2020 arrived, and the entire city shut down. The pandemic and the emptying out. San Francisco was one of the first major American cities to issue shelter-in-place orders in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The city moved quickly, and the streets went quiet almost overnight. What happened next was something that San Francisco and much of the country had not anticipated. The workers who had filled the downtown offices, who had eaten in the restaurants and shopped in the stores and filled the BART trains every morning, did not come back. Not fully, not even close. Before the pandemic, about 6% of San Francisco workers did most of their work from home. By 2021, that number had risen to more than 45%. San Francisco's concentration of technology jobs that could be done just as easily from a home office in Denver or Austin or rural Vermont, made the city particularly vulnerable to this shift. And unlike workers in other industries, tech workers could leave and still keep their jobs. The population loss was swift and significant. According to the California Department of Finance, San Francisco's population dropped by around 40,000 people in the 2020 calendar year alone. Over the following 2 years, net migration out of the city reached over 60,000 people, about 7% of the entire population. San Francisco had not seen population losses of that scale in a very long time. The workers who left took their spending with them. Sales tax revenue in San Francisco dropped by 43% between the second quarter of 2019 and the second quarter of 2020. The downtown restaurants, coffee shops, dry cleaners, and corner stores that depended on the daily presence of office workers had lost their customer base. Many of them did not survive. The office towers that had defined the skyline went dark on the inside. San Francisco's office vacancy rate, which had been in the low single digits before the pandemic, climbed steadily through 2021 and 2022 and kept rising. By 2024, it had reached over 35%, one of the highest office vacancy rates ever recorded in any major American city. Union Square, the heart of San Francisco's retail district, told a particularly stark story. From 2019 to 2023, the number of operating stores in Union Square fell from 207 to just 107. The vacancy rate in that area reached as high as 47%. The names of the stores that left were familiar ones: Uniqlo, H&M, The North Face, Walgreens, all closed prominent Union Square locations during that period. Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's both exited the Westfield San Francisco Center, a large downtown mall that eventually defaulted on its loans and was taken over by lenders. Walking down Market Street, the city's main corridor, in 2023 or 2024 meant passing a long string of empty storefronts, their windows papered over or dark, retail for lease signs appearing in one building after another. The Palace Hotel had vacancies, spaces right across from the Ferry Building. One of the most tourist-trafficked areas in the city sat empty. Think about what that meant in practice. The Ferry Building had long been one of the most visited spots in San Francisco. Tourists and locals alike crowded its Saturday morning farmers market, its restaurants, its specialty food stalls. And yet, just steps away, buildings sat completely dark. That juxtaposition, life in one small pocket, emptiness immediately surrounding it, became the defining visual of downtown San Francisco in the post-pandemic years. Citywide, the retail vacancy rate, which had sat around 3.5% in 2019, climbed to 7.7% by the end of 2024. And that number, while meaningful, didn't fully capture what it felt like to be in certain neighborhoods. Mission Street between 14th and Cesar Chavez had 56 empty commercial storefronts in early 2024, according to a count by Mission Local. A corner space near 17th, and Mission had been sitting vacant for more than 5 years. The city tried various responses. In late 2023, San Francisco partnered with local nonprofits to launch a program called Vacant to Vibrant, which offered short-term, subsidized leases to small businesses and artists willing to fill empty downtown storefronts. By mid-2024, pop-up shops, galleries, and local vendors had appeared in some of the spaces in Union Square and the financial district. It was a beginning, but it was a small one relative to the scale of what had been lost. What remote work did to a city built for presence. The pandemic accelerated something that was already beginning to happen, but it did so at a speed and scale that left San Francisco particularly exposed. The tech industry had always understood itself as flexible and forward-thinking. When major companies announced that employees could work from home indefinitely, Twitter, Slack, Pinterest, and others made these announcements in 2020, It validated something that many workers had already decided for themselves. They didn't need to live in San Francisco anymore. For a city that had built so much of its recent economy on the daily presence of highly paid technology workers, on their rents, their restaurant bills, their dry cleaning, their gym memberships, their coffee, this was a structural shock. The economists described it as a donut effect, the hollowing out of the city center, with spending dispersing outward to suburbs and other regions while the dense urban core emptied. Stanford University economists who studied the phenomenon estimated that San Francisco was losing billions of dollars a year in local spending as a result of remote work. The city's tax revenues, already under pressure from declining business activity, were being squeezed from multiple directions at once. The workers who left didn't necessarily go far. Many moved to Bay Area suburbs, Marin County, the East Bay, the South Bay. They stayed in the region, but gave up the city. Others left California entirely. Tech workers headed to Denver, Austin, Miami, and other cities with lower costs of living and no state income tax. They brought their jobs with them in their laptops. The question of whether those workers would come back was asked many times over the following years. The honest answer, several years on, is not most of them. The city has seen some recovery in office leasing activity, and some large companies have signed new leases downtown. But office vacancy remains above 34% as of 2025, and the daily rhythm of downtown San Francisco has not returned to what it was before. The citywide downtown foot traffic has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels, and economists and city planners have largely stopped predicting that it will. The compounding weight of it all. What makes San Francisco's situation difficult to understand is that it isn't one thing. It is many things pressing down at the same time. You have the effects of the pandemic and remote work, the sudden, massive reduction in downtown presence that hollowed out the retail and service economy. You have the long history of extremely high housing costs, which had already been pushing out lower-income residents, working-class communities, and even middle-class families for years before the pandemic accelerated the trend. You have the drug crisis, which had been building for decades and reached devastating proportions in the years after 2020. Around 800 people died of overdoses in 2023. The open drug market in the Tenderloin and Soma was a deeply visible part of downtown life in ways that affected how residents, tourists, and potential business tenants experienced the city. You have the retreat of major retailers who cited safety, high rents, and declining foot traffic as reasons for leaving, and whose departures made the remaining storefronts even harder to fill because empty blocks send a signal. You have the city's budget difficulties. Office activities had generated around 75% of the city's GDP before the pandemic. As that activity fell, the city's tax revenues fell with it. The projected budget deficit in 2021 was $411 million, with expectations that it would grow further if corrective action wasn't taken. And underneath all of it is something harder to quantify: the sense that the city lost people who would have been part of its future. Young professionals, artists, small business owners, families, people who left during the pandemic and found that the places they moved to were, in many ways, easier to live in. The question of whether they would come back has been answered quietly by the fact that many of them haven't. The city that had once been a magnet for the beats, for the hippies, for the gay rights movement, for the tech industry, had stopped pulling people in the same way. The slow signs of something stirring. It would be dishonest to say there is nothing happening on the other side of this ledger, because there are signs, early, partial, uneven, that San Francisco is beginning to find its footing again. By 2025, San Francisco's retail vacancy rate had declined slightly, from a high of around 7.2% in 2024 to about 6.5%. Leasing activity picked up, with roughly 25% more retail space sold in 2025 compared to the year before. Dining reservations in the city were up 20% from 2024, according to the reservation platform OpenTable. Some neighborhoods never really lost their vitality. Hayes Street, Fillmore Street, Chestnut Street, and Jackson Street, neighborhood commercial corridors away from downtown, have maintained vacancy rates of just 3 to 4%. The parts of San Francisco that were built around residential communities, rather than around office workers commuting in from outside the city, held on in ways that downtown could not. The office market showed its first glimmer of genuine recovery in 2025, when more space was leased than vacated. The first time that had happened since 2019. Mission Bay, where OpenAI has its headquarters, had an office vacancy rate below 9%. The Presidio was doing well. The AI industry had begun to fill some of the space that the departing tech workers left behind. Mayor Daniel Lurie, who took office in early 2025, had made a point of signaling that San Francisco was open for business. Some commercial real estate professionals noted that the city's reputation, long battered by negative headlines, had begun to shift modestly. San Francisco was also looking ahead to the 2026 FIFA World Cup, with games scheduled for the Bay Area. The Moscone Center had booked 36 conferences for 2026, up from 34 in 2025. The city ranked second on a major travel company's list of trending destinations for 2026. Tourism, which had been one of the most important parts of the city's pre-pandemic economy, was beginning to move again. These are real things. They matter. But they exist alongside an office vacancy rate still above 34%, a citywide retail vacancy higher than it was before the pandemic, an unemployment rate that had reached 4.2% by late 2025, and a downtown that still does not feel like itself. The honest picture is one of a city that hit a very hard floor and is, in certain places and certain ways, beginning to push back up, but hasn't yet made it anywhere near where it was. What it means for a city to lose itself. Cities are not buildings or businesses or skylines. They are people. They are the daily choices of hundreds of thousands of individuals to be somewhere together, to eat in the same restaurants, to walk the same streets, to share the noise and the inconvenience and the surprise of city life. What San Francisco lost over the last several years was not just economic activity. It lost people. And with them, it lost something about what it had been. The Fillmore that had been called the Harlem of the West. The Haight-Ashbury, where 100,000 people arrived one summer because they believed something was possible. The Castro, where people built a community out of their own refusal to disappear. The North Beach coffee houses, where a generation of writers found their voice. These were not just historical events. They were the layers of experience that made San Francisco feel like it had a soul, like it had earned its own identity over time. A city that empties out doesn't just lose tax revenue, it loses memory. It loses the accumulated presence of people who knew each other, who had history in a neighborhood, who remembered what a block used to be before it changed. For those who lived in San Francisco through its various eras, through the counterculture years, through the AIDS crisis of the 1980s, through the dot-com boom and bust, through the second tech wave, the current emptiness must feel like a particular kind of grief. Not because things were ever perfect. They weren't. San Francisco always had hard problems: homelessness, inequality, the displacement of communities that couldn't afford to stay. But it also had something that felt irreplaceable: the sense that this was one of the few places in America where an enormous range of people were genuinely trying to figure out how to live together in something complicated and real. That spirit isn't gone, but it's quieter than it used to be. San Francisco is still here. The Bay still glitters in the morning light. The cable cars still run. The fog still rolls in over Twin Peaks in the late afternoon and turns the top of the city white. For those of us who remember what the city felt like at its most alive, or who have watched from the outside as its story unfolded over the decades, what's happened carries a particular kind of weight. We've seen other cities change. We've watched neighborhoods we loved transform into something unrecognizable or shrink away from what they used to be. But San Francisco always seemed different. It always seemed like the kind of city that could absorb change and still come out itself on the other side. Whether that's still true is the question that the next several years will begin to answer. But the streets feel different. The downtown is not what it was. The stores that were there are not all there anymore. The people who filled the offices, the restaurants, the transit lines, many of them are somewhere else now, living different lives in different cities. What happened to San Francisco is the result of many forces pressing on a city at the same time: a pandemic, a remote work revolution, a drug crisis, decades of rising housing costs, the departure of communities that had given neighborhoods their character. None of these things happened overnight. All of them were building for years. The city is trying to find its way back. There are real signs of recovery in some places. There are new businesses opening, new leases being signed, new reasons for people to visit and stay. The story is not over. But understanding where San Francisco is now requires being honest about what it went through. And being honest means acknowledging that a city which was once one of the most alive places in America has spent several years being very, very quiet. That quiet is the shocking reality of San Francisco today. If this video made you think about cities differently or brought back some memories of San Francisco, please give it a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. We'll see you in the next one.